Vladimir Putin exposed it. And I got it off the European networks out of Russia. The Vladimir Putin had been studying this because he'd been studying this phosgene gas because he didn't want the U.S. to have it. So he was on it because of what it is. We had it. He knew in Iraq that we got it. He's not stupid. He's a very smart man. I respect him on that level.
Level.
Yeah, and he exposed that. And then of course, it came out, but then it kind of like fizzled out. I mean, that's the kind of undercover stuff that's going on. And who knows if they're dosing people again with phosgene gas, because that's some pretty powerful. It's the most deadly gas there is. You don't have very long to live once you take a whiff of that stuff. Yeah, and
but getting back to the holograms,
mm-hmm.
So they would use this software,
right?
Concoct some event,
right?
Start showing it on television,
right?
Do you think they even have the capability of taking over the networks if they wanted to?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because most networks, MSNBC, all the major networks, it's government money that's running those. If you start going against the government, they put pressure on the sponsors, and you know the story. I mean, the sponsors cut them off, and the way the thing goes. So yeah, they have, and as I wrote about in my book, CIA, controls the networks. I mean, it's in a broad, statement in my book from one of the CIA directors. I think it was Colby, and yeah, they would. But then on top of that, you got to understand that they have these, and we had these a long time ago. Back when I started my electronics company, I got into some entrepreneurial things. And one of them was a 3D, it was before lasers were real popular. It was a 3D projector that would put an advertisement on the side of a building, and it would almost look three-dimensional. And this was back in the 70s. And we could do that. Forget the name of the thing. It sold for like a couple $1,000s. And we sold a lot of those for advertisements on buildings in the middle of the night. But today, from satellites, it's no problem to project an actual visual hologram. So this, even if you remember the first Iraqi war, when all of those troops suddenly surrendered, that was some of the delivery. I mean, I could give you some names of delivery companies that deliver this stuff.
They took their uniforms off, put them down, and walked away.
Yeah, they did.
Then I think some of them came back as those freedom fighters, but they ran away anyway. Yeah,
they ran away anyway because they were hit with technologies that are being developed even more now. And that's all part of this holographic thing. I mean, it's hard. It's like when we work with the healing side of it. We have a process where we go into the body and we look at the inside of the body on a three-dimensional level, and you can see all these things going on because we use the thermal scan first, and then you can see what goes on in the body, and then you can project that into 3D imagery into a person's glasses. They're wearing these glasses, and they can see changes in their body when you apply different technologies and sciences that we've developed over the years. And it's really cool. This is stuff that I've been involved with. But, I mean, I can see the weapon side of it. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, I went last fall, I went to a 3D convention up there by the center where they play basketball there in L.A.,
Mm-hmm. Staples Center.
Staples Center, right next door there. And the people, Chinese, Japanese, Russian companies from all over the world were demonstrating holographic stuff. And one of the really interesting things that I talked to Wesley Snipes about it because they were using it in some of his movie stunts, is that they have a screen.
He needed a holographic image of himself before the IRS got him.
Yeah, exactly. He did. But anyway, they have dancers. They would scan the dancer, okay? Then they have a stage, and there's the dancer out on stage doing this perfect dance. It looks like the dancer, but it's a hologram.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you haven't seen that yet?
No, I'll search for it.
Yeah, search for it because they're out there dancing, and then they show you how they did it, how they scanned the person. And I'm looking on a stage, and I'm seeing somebody out there dancing, and there's nobody there.
So it looks like a person.
Totally. Really, really, very well done.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they use that special effects now for some of this weird stuff that they can't normally do because once they map a person, jumping and, flipping over and doing what they can do, and then they take the computer and take it to the next step, which do things the person can't do, but they've captured enough imagery in fast succession so that it allows them to produce that image.
Well, look at that Super Bowl commercial with Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
Or GoDaddy.com.
Yeah.
I mean, they put her head on some woman's body that obviously wasn't Joan Rivers.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's one of the same. You know what?
It does. I'm sure Joan Rivers liked that.
Yeah, she probably did. Well, she's probably wondering if they can do that for real.
Yeah.
There was an old movie called 7 Days in May, came out in '64 with Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, about how the military leaders wanted to overthrow the president because he supports a nuclear arms treaty with the Russians, and the military didn't want that.
Right.
But the funny part about that movie, and I don't mean ha-ha funny, they had the capability of interrupting the television networks. Burt Lancaster was the general. He was going to take over the country. I'm not going to give that movie away totally.
Yeah, right.
But they did have the ability to hit a switch, Fred, and then Burt Lancaster, the general, was going to come on and say, hey, this is what's happened. We're in charge now. And I've always wondered if government had that capability.
Government has that capability, George. Trust me. As you do more shows with more people over the next, I'd say between now and this time next year, a lot of shocking stuff is going to come forward because internally they're breaking up a bit. There's problems with the internal way the government works. People aren't people anywhere, and you can see all the conflict in this world right now, and that's being internalized, and that's something they weren't really prepared for, and not something they can really deal with on the internal levels. I mean, this lady just got out of the Iraqi war, and she came back and two kids. She was just discharged. It was in the news today, and she's homeless. I mean, how do we take care of our people? I mean, our military should take care of our people when they discharge and not just throw them out on the street, because she's a woman with two kids. That stuff goes way deep,
Well, and isn't it the same way when they get out of prison?
Yeah.
They get out of prison. I mean, who's there waiting for them? What if they don't have any friends? How do they get away? Do they give them a bus ticket?
Yeah.
I mean, and where do they go? Are they set up in an apartment or a home? Do they have a job waiting for them? Who's going to hire them?
Yeah, it's sad.
Well, I mean, would you hire a bank robber?
No, I sure wouldn't.
I mean,
probably have in the past, but not intentionally.
No, even if he might be rehabilitated. Look, we've got a huge prisoner listenership to this show. As a matter of fact, producer Tom came up to me yesterday and said, we got to do a remote out of a prison.
That would be good.
And I said I would do that only if we could do it where Charlie Manson is, because I wanted to interview him. I've wanted to interview him since I was in this business.
Wow.
A long time ago. But so we'll see what happens. Now, he got the idea with Johnny Cash playing at Folsom Prison.
Wow.
You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So, but you also key in on electronic harassment. Explain what that is.
Okay, electronic harassment it comes in many levels. It's their surveillance. It's imposed surveillance of people's belongings or surroundings. Electronic, listening devices, transmitting, imaging, all that kind of stuff. Microcorders. Video cameras like the news reporter that was harassed through the window of her motel that guy finally went to jail.
Yeah.
Then there's electronic sabotage, which is actually messing up somebody's computer, destroying it, and they're using EMI pulses more and more. And then there's what we call directed high energy devices, where I've actually seen microwave ovens taken apart and directing high energy beams, which causes heating because it's in the shorter wavelength, so it causes heating on the body. And then it goes up to the EMP rifles, and the technology really starts to blossom from there, and then it comes up to into a voice data imaging, and then of course the short wavelength imaging that goes on, and in that form, it's where this radar. There's a company called I forget. It's down here in San Diego. It's called a radar flashlight, and what they do, it detects a human presence through doors and walls up to 8 inches thick. It uses a 16-degree radar beam. And it looks at your movements inside. It looks at how your vocal patterns are, all these kinds of things. And they do this from outside your house. Now they wouldn't be able to do it around here where I'm at because it only has a short range. But I'm just saying, in a city, this is no problem. And the radar flashlight, it goes into a bigger emotional. It becomes like an emotional cluster, and it goes into a large system that is, put together by the NSA on everybody now, and so you have your vocal speech patterns, monitored. So with that, they can then introduce, radiation into the body, and it will actually cause you to have involuntary, movements and things like that in your body. That's another form of harassment.
When some person says, Fred, that they're hearing voices in their head,
right,
and some people say, you know what, you may be a little nutty.
Yeah.
How many of them are actually hearing something, being bombarded by something?
A lot, because, the first time that I had that experience was when I was at the National Health Federation at the Chicago Rosemont hotel. People came out, they were an 80-year-old couple, and they came to me and they said, this truck had been following them around with a microwave antenna on it, and they were hearing voices at night in their hotel, in their house, in their apartment, and then they moved in, and then they heard voices again. And this is the early form of it. Well, I kind of shined that on. This is back in about 78 or 79. Then I got down to Florida. We were doing a show down there, and another couple approached me, the same thing. And then we got out to New York City and others, and pretty soon I had about 50 people telling me the same thing. And that was kind of my intro into what was going on.
You're beginning to think maybe something's to this.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when I began to start develop devices to stop that, to break it up. And then the bottom line was, though, it got more sophisticated. It's in the satellite technology now, and they upload these patterns like they would gather from the radar flashlight and other sources, and the people are then totally influenced by this. And unless they do something about it, and you've had John Hall on your show before. He's a medical doctor over in Texas.
Right.
And he and I have been working together. He has literally thousands of people now that have this problem. And I've actually had thousands of clients that have these problems.
Well, how do they select these people to go after?
That's the $10,000 million question.
And why?
I could not answer that. And so neither could John. They select people from all walks of life get selected.
Unless they're experiments.
Yeah, they're experiments.
It could be experiments. It could be saying, let's see if we can drive this person crazy.
Yeah.
And just, see how long it takes, and let's give it a try. Now, again, back in the 50s, government tested chemicals and biologicals over St. Louis, over a Navy ship. It happened. It's true. They've admitted it.
Yeah.
So who's to say this isn't true, too?
Yeah, let me just give you a second here. Some of the symptoms for those of you listening.
Let's do that when we come right back, Fred. We're already at the top of the hour. Our special guest tonight, Fred Bell, author of The Inside Track. We'll get some of the symptoms of electronic harassment. Maybe you're being bombarded. We'll find out.